On the morning of August 24, 79 AD, the residents of Pompeii woke up to a perfectly ordinary day. Merchants opened their stalls. Bread was pulled from ovens. Children ran through the streets. The bakers, the politicians, the gladiators, the slaves, all of them going about their lives in one of the most prosperous cities in the Roman Empire. By the following morning, every single one of them was gone. Not fled, not evacuated, gone. And the world would not find them again for nearly 1700 years. Pompeii in 79 AD was a city of roughly 11,000 people, sitting at the southwestern foot of Mount Vesuvius on the Bay of Naples. It was wealthy, cosmopolitan. It had an amphitheatre, a forum, 2 theatres, multiple bathhouses, and more wine bars per square mile than most modern European cities manage today. The Romans knew Vesuvius was a mountain. They did not know it was a volcano. The concept barely existed. In the Latin of the time, there was no precise word for what Vesuvius actually was. They simply saw a mountain, and a fertile one at that. Its slopes were covered in vineyards because volcanic soil is extraordinarily rich. People had been farming those slopes for centuries, without incident, without fear. There had been a severe earthquake 17 years earlier in 62 AD that cracked walls and toppled temples across the city. But the Romans rebuilt. They always rebuilt. And by 79 AD, Pompeii was thriving once more, its walls freshly plastered, its temples restored, its streets full of life. What no one understood was that the earthquake had been a warning. Beneath the mountain, something ancient was stirring. Vesuvius was waking up. In the weeks leading up to August 24, 79 AD, the people of Pompeii began to notice that something felt wrong. They just did not know what. Wells that had supplied the city for generations ran dry, overnight, without explanation. Natural springs along the hillside simply stopped flowing. The ground trembled repeatedly, small unsettling shocks that rolled through the streets and rattled the walls. Dismissed each time as ordinary tremors. Italy had always shaken. It always would. But the animals knew. Dogs refused to go anywhere near the mountain. Birds abandoned the vineyards on Vesuvius's slopes, vineyards that had been alive with birdsong for as long as anyone could remember. The hillside went silent. These were not omens or superstitions. They were geophysical events with precise explanations. Explanations that would not exist for another 1800 years. Magma surging beneath the surface was displacing groundwater, cutting off the springs and the wells. The movement of rock was releasing gases that animals with their far sharper senses could detect and instinctively flee from. But in 79 AD, there was no framework for any of this, no word in Latin for what Vesuvius was, no science to interpret what the mountain was telling them. And so the people of Pompeii went about their lives. The morning of August 24th arrived like any other, bright, warm, unremarkable. The markets opened, the baths filled with steam, the city breathed. At approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon on August 24th, 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius exploded. Not with rivers of lava, not with a slow cinematic rumble. With an eruption so instantaneous and so violent that the top of the mountain was simply gone. In its place, a column of superheated gas, ash, and pulverized rock fired nearly 33 kilometers straight into the sky. 20 miles, straight up. It is called a Plinian column, named, with some irony, after the very man who watched it form. 17 miles away, at the Roman naval base of Misenum, Pliny the Elder watched the column rise. Beside him stood his 18-year-old nephew. He wrote that the cloud resembled a pine tree, a vast trunk of smoke and debris spreading at the top into a wide, flat canopy of ash. Pliny the Elder did not run. He ordered his warships launched and sailed directly toward the eruption dhow to rescue people and to observe. He was a man of science. He would not survive the day. Back in Pompeii, the first hour brought not fire, but stone. A rain of pumice began falling at a rate that made it impossible to stand outside. Rooftops groaned. Some collapsed entirely. Thousands locked their doors and waited for it to stop. It would not stop. Above them, the column, 33 kilometers of compressed fury, was becoming unstable. At approximately 1 o'clock in the morning, 12 hours after the eruption began, the column collapsed. 33 kilometers of compressed ash, gas, and rock. Too heavy to sustain itself, gravity pulled it back down in seconds, and when it fell, everything it contained was released outward at once, as a pyroclastic surge, a superheated wave of gas, ash, and pulverized rock. Moving at up to 700 kilometers per hour, faster than a commercial aircraft, at temperatures of 300 degrees Celsius, it did not creep, it did not trickle, it arrived. Herculaneum, Pompeii's neighbor to the northwest, was hit first. The people there had run to the seafront, crowding into stone boat sheds along the beach, hoping rescue ships would come. The surge found them there. They died instantaneously. Their brains had boiled inside their skulls. Archaeologists found their skeletons 2,000 years later, exactly as they had fallen. Pompeii received its first pyroclastic surge at approximately 6:30 in the morning, then a second, then a third. The thousands who had stayed died in moments, not from suffocation, not slowly, from the catastrophic thermal shock of air hot enough to kill a human being in a single breath. They died in the positions they were in, some covering their faces, some holding the people beside them. By 7 o'clock on the morning of August 25th, Pompeii was gone, buried under 5 meters of volcanic debris. And then, silence. The Emperor Titus organized one of the largest disaster relief operations in Roman history. He visited the site himself. He sent senators with emergency funds. But there was nothing to save. There was no longer a there. Within a generation, the exact location of Pompeii had been largely forgotten. Farmland was cultivated over the site. Roads were built across it. The city slept for 1,700 years. In 1748, workers digging on a rural hillside south of Naples struck something unexpected. Walls, painted walls, with frescoes still intact. Pompeii had been found. And what they found was not merely a ruin. It was a city frozen at the precise moment of its death. A loaf of bread, carbonized but still recognizable. Election slogans painted on walls. In 1863, Giuseppe Fiorelli developed a technique of pouring liquid plaster into the voids left by decomposed bodies. Exact casts of the people of Pompeii. Vesuvius is still an active volcano. Another major eruption is not a question of if, but when. We are limited by what we can imagine.